Five Star Founder is a podcast created by founders for founders. I believe everyone you ever meet knows something you don't. Each episode features a founder from a variety of backgrounds, sectors, and entrepreneurial stages, with whom I hope to learn, celebrate, understand, and get a deeper insight into their world. We will cover everything from what drove our founders to start their company, to what keeps them awake at night, biggest regret to date, as well as their career highs and lows in their journey so far. Like me, Domenica started her illustrious career in sales, where all the best founders start, obviously. Domenica has held a number of roles within a variety of industries, from print, display, as well as communications and advertising too. She set up Emerging Communications 5 years ago. Before that, she ran and sold a digital marketing agency, which I hope we can find out more about. Emerging Communications provides consultancy and strategic advice on entering and marketing to the Chinese market, which comes with its own challenges, I'm sure. Aside from leading the growth of her company across Europe, Domenica also works for a number of global organizations at board level, providing strategic advice on their China market entry and subsequent digital strategy, which I'm sure is keeping her and her team super busy. When not working, you will find Domenica enjoying time with her daughter and practicing yoga and drinking lots of water. Welcome to the show, Domenica.
Good morning. Lovely to see you again.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. The first thing I want to know in terms of yourself, just for the benefit of the audience, could you tell us who you are and what you do?
I am the CEO and co-founder of Emerging Communications, and we are a Chinese digital agency based here in London and Shanghai. We work with predominantly British, but also European brands who are looking to be, I say, more successful in China because most of our clients are already in China, and we offer every digital service you can imagine, as well as offline support to help both new startups in China, but also very well-established brands, a lot of whom you've heard of, be more successful in China. So my team are predominantly Chinese nationals based here, but I also have a small team of Brits as well.
Yeah, when I was doing my research, I noticed that you've got like a global team. Some
Yes.
are based abroad in China, mostly seems like they're in UK. And I guess you've had to deal with this kind of remote working or working from, with your colleagues across for a lot longer than some of us have had to do. Well, we've had it entrusted upon us rather than you who've had it, by plan. What has been your biggest challenges for you in recent times when it comes to working with your colleagues who are abroad?
Interestingly, I was having a chat with my China team this morning, their afternoon, and COVID working for me hasn't really changed my day. So by that, I mean, I spend 90% of my day on the phone, 90% of my day on video, talking to teams around the world, either clients, suppliers, or staff. And so whilst I have staff in Shanghai and London, or currently working at home in London, I also am dealing with clients all over the world. So I'm dealing with different time zones. And I've been on Teams and Zoom for 5 years. So this is not new working for us at all. And we've always had a flexi culture. But for me, the biggest change post-COVID is the fact that it was lovely when I used to go to the office, and albeit I'd have my door shut some of the time, I'd be on the phone, but I could see people, we'd have lunch, I could, have one-on-one conversations. And also it was really good for my Chinese because I was exposed to Chinese all day, whereas now I'm not. So I'm finding my Chinese isn't coming on as quickly. And I just miss people and I miss meeting clients. And we would have in our office 4 or 5 meetings going on at once in any one day. People would travel from all over the UK and come and see us. We'd also be running external workshops. So we've had to pivot all of our training online, create vlogs, create videos, create webinars. That was a bit of a learning curve for me. And I'll be honest, I prefer seeing people face to face. I'm used to being on a stage and talking to an audience. I found it very different talking to a screen, especially when you're doing training. And even onboarding of new clients, which we've always done face to face, even if we have to fly somewhere, which is a very common occurrence. And I typically would be on a plane once a week, certainly in 2019. And I haven't been on a plane for 14 months. That's been a massive shock. But there's been some good stuff too. I can now practice yoga every day. I walk the dog every day. I see my daughter all the time. So there's been some wonderful things, and certainly my staff have learned all sorts of new skills. So it's not all bad, and we were very well placed to cope with it because we were set up to do it already.
Yeah, you already had the existing infrastructure for this kind of thing to have happened. I want to go back to, like emerging communications. That's one part of the question. Then the second part is going to be about China. What made you want to start emerging communications?
Right, this is an interesting one. So as you said, alluded to earlier on, I've been in print a long time, and then I moved over to digital, and I'd sold a digital agency that specialized in front-end development for e-commerce, and thought that I'd be one of these people. And then I became a parent, so I thought I'd be one of those people that would just enjoy some time off. And I'll get onto that later. But as with most entrepreneurs, I got itchy feet really quickly and was like, well, what am I going to do now? And I tried to sort of project myself to the future. And at that time, we're talking 2012, 13. I'd obviously been in the digital industry. I've been in the e-com and the web industry, and I could see the writing on the wall in that industry. I knew it was all going to become dominated by Shopify and Magento. It was going to become a commoditized industry. So I thought, I don't want to go back into that. And to cut a long story short, when I was looking for a role, something to cut my teeth, I was interviewed by many agencies to be an interim MD. And I thought, well, A, I'm a parent now, and B, I don't really want to be an MD. And then I got an opportunity to work for a Chinese digital agency that was a new startup really in the UK in a commercial director role, which actually ended up being more than just pure sales and more about setting up infrastructure. And it was challenging, but I could see that there was a real opportunity in China. And I remember saying to my husband, I will never set up another agency. I will never do it again.
Famous last words.
Such hard work in the first 4 years, and it's stressful. And I said, I'm never going to do it again. And to cut a long story short, I felt and still feel more vehemently now post or during COVID-19 than ever before. There are lots of Chinese digital agencies out there, and they specialize by channel, for example, search marketing or social, or they specialize by sector. And we don't work like that. So we are channel agnostic, and we work with multiple categories across education, B2B, pharma, retail, travel. And we have one thing in common with every single client. We have like an 8C methodology, which takes clients through the context, the competitive analysis. So we formulate a plan around their competitive advantage. Then we put together a channel plan. So we're strategically led. And a lot of agencies say that they are, and they're not. So the results we get for the same amount of spend with us versus another agency is, well, blows everything out of the water. But we're not for everybody. So people that don't want to do the strategic part at the beginning, they're not for us, we're not for them. I felt vehemently that it was missing in the industry, and I still feel that. And I've still yet to meet any other agency. There's only one that behaves like this, and I really respect them, and they're friends of ours. But generally, agencies are way too tactical for China. And China's too complicated and moves too quickly. You can't do that. So that's why I started. It was more of a stupid passion where I felt that somebody who wasn't Chinese and didn't at the time speak any Chinese, but knew how to run businesses and agencies, should launch a Chinese agency. When I now look back, I think, God, how did I do that?
I think, like around the time we met initially, I think I was working for a company that would help you go into other markets and do consulting and translations, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that was a pretty safe, cushy role that I had. And, I always knew that I wanted to leave and do something by myself. And like everything, friends and family, even though I was considering, why am I doing this? Why am I going out on my own? But it was just an itch that I needed to scratch, and I would just have this regret for forever. So before, I guess you'd sold the business, the digital marketing agency, you took on a commercial directorship role. Is that when you started first engaging with like the Chinese market, or was there any history? Okay. Could you tell us?
Totally. I had never been to China at that point. I didn't speak any Chinese at that point. I didn't know the market, didn't understand the market, but I understood how to run an agency. So that's why they brought me in. And by learning about the market, I had become quite bored in the UK digital market. I felt that we'd matured And UK is still probably one of the best web countries in terms of provision. But I felt that China offered energy, passion, agility, all the things that I felt the UK market become quite stagnant. And I had very little to learn, and I was bored. And I can't help myself. If there's a challenge, I want to do it. I wouldn't class myself as your typical entrepreneur at all. And we'll get onto that later. There's a lot of things, habits I have that a lot of entrepreneurs don't have, and vice versa. I've even set up this agency and this company with a senior management team who I trust with my life.
Yeah.
So that they can run their divisions and they are totally autonomous. And I'm still heavily involved in sales, thought leadership, and consultancy, because that's what I want to do. So I think it was more a frustration because I could see there was a real gap, and it interested me. I never set out to set up another agency when I started. I thought we'd be just a small outfit of consultants and that would be it. So it was not really my plan. It happened by accident.
Let's talk it through. You sold the company, you took on a commercial directorship role where you got your first exposure to China and the potential that you have within this market. Then you went to do another commercial directorship role, and then you set up emerging communications. My question was going to be, who was your first hire? And could you tell us, I know this is going back 5 years, what was your first day like as founder of a business again?
I remember I was in this home office here, and because we'd moved to this house 6 months prior, and my days were very different in the first couple of months. So the first, say, 3 months, I was on my own. At that time, I was very, very keen that when I started this company, I didn't steal any clients or even approach them. And I don't know anybody who's been stupid enough to start a business that way, but I was really adamant I was going to do it off my own back. So I don't even remember how I won the first client, but I think it was word of mouth. And that's how I've always won business.
Yeah.
It was referral, word of mouth. It was a relatively small retailer. Well, I say small, it was a very well-known retailer, actually, who I'd known for a number of years that we helped out. My first hire was very early doors. Her name's Melody. She's my co-founder, now ops director. And Melody is the yin to my yang. So just as my previous company was my husband and I, he headed up ops and delivery, and I did all the sales, marketing, finance, supporting roles at my previous agency. In this instance, I knew that I obviously couldn't be taken seriously unless I was to partner with somebody that A, spoke fluent Chinese, Melody's Taiwanese, and could do the delivery side. So to start with, it was us two, and then we got an intern, and we worked out of, so when Melody came on board, we worked out of some, now I think about it, ridiculous offices near, central London, Piccadilly, very dark, and literally just, it looked a bit like a library. So WeWork wasn't massive then.
Yeah.
That sort of option wasn't as available as it is now, put it that way. WeWork was just coming online. And so we had an intern for a year, and he did a bit of administration and a bit of marketing. And then we went from there. And I would say the biggest change in the business is I've got two people in my management team. One is Rocky and one is Yvonne, and they're amazing. And Rocky came on board very early. So she's been with me 5 years. The business has been going nearly 6.
Wow.
And I hired her and one other through a scheme that the government run, which was a tier 4 visa scheme where you employed international students who had postgraduate study, and you brought them into the organisation. And then she's been with me ever since, and she's incredible. And she's now heads up marketing, strategy planning. She's brilliant. And then very soon afterwards, about 6 months, a year later, we bought another company, and that then bought with that company, Yvonne, who'd been with me at a previous agency. And those two hires were instrumental in our success, I'd say, because it's all about people. Yeah.
I want to go back to something you mentioned. Sounds like the company that you worked with, that you sold, I guess, I don't know if it's the one you sold, where you worked with your husband, you were doing marketing sales, whereas now you're kind of doing more strategic and also being the face of the company and also being more kind of the thought leader. How has your growth as a person changed, and how have you been able to switch between different hats that you must wear as a business owner?
That's a really interesting one. One of the best advice I can give anybody is to get a coach, get a mentor. So in the last 2.5 years, I've had 3 mentors. The first one was all about letting go and delegation. The second one was about how you actually make that happen operationally. And the third one was about health and stress management. And I'll talk a bit more about that later. Life-changing. So I started to look at things very differently. I started to have a plan. Well, if we are going to go into an agency, then what does that look like? And how can I extract myself from the things I hate? So I am not a typical founder in as much that I know a lot of founders that work 24/7. I don't. I'm now a parent, so I can't and I won't. I learnt to manage stress. I learnt with this agency with coaching, mentorship and help to extract myself from the things I'm not good at. So you really have 2 choices as an entrepreneur. You either are a one-man band or a small outfit where you are doing the doing. And you're in the business working. And I decided with this business, I wasn't going to do that. I wanted to, in my early 50s now, I'm not in my 30s. And so I was like, okay, I need to build a team up around me. And it's taken me 5 years to get my perfect management team. Rocky, Melody and Yvonne have been there since the beginning, but I've also now got a commercial director, an HR manager and a finance director, all of whom are instrumental, as well as all the people that they manage. And that's made a massive difference. And we're still not there yet. So I've only just got rid of marketing a couple of weeks ago. And now I'm trying to work out a sales structure and process because we don't have a sales director. It's kind of me. And so that needs thought. But sort of coming back to strengths and weaknesses, recognizing what you're good at. And for me, it's people. I love people. I love managing teams, molding teams, recognizing strengths. I liken my job to playing chess. I move pieces around a board all day. That's what I do. So I found that even with the 28 staff we've got, which is relatively small compared to other agencies, it kind of doesn't matter whether we're 28, 56, 200, 500, 1,000. As long as I've got those 6 people and then ultimately 2 people above that who are bringing together the functions of the business, one the delivery side and one the sort of general management side, that's fairly critical for growth because there are only so many hours in the day and you can't create a time machine. So you have to just extrapolate yourself from as much as possible and do the things you enjoy. And so I try and make sure that my staff, the people that report to me and their teams are playing to their strengths. And I am too. So I don't do detail, never have, which makes being a leader a lot easier, I have to say. And I know an awful lot of entrepreneurs who will remain nameless because if they see this, they'll know who they are, who I've coached, who like detail. If you like detail, don't be an entrepreneur because you can't lead and run a business, a team of people, if you want to control everything and you want to do the detail. You're better off just being a freelancer, a specialist.
Funny you should say that because I'm just going to grab this. Just coincidentally, I'm actually reading this book called E-Myth.
It's brilliant.
It's sort of halfway through, and this goes to the question I want to ask you. Actually, you mentioned getting a coach or a mentor to help you let go. Could you tell us about what you did before you understood that you needed to let go? Were you kind of very involved in every aspect of your business, which meant that you kind of looked at the details but never the bigger picture, and how you got over that? What was the advice that really chimed with you that made you want to kind of say, you know what, I need to work on the business rather than in the business?
Well, you hear that saying, don't you, all the time? And I used to think, God, what a load of crap. And then I made some mistakes, huge, humongous, costly mistakes. So we've done really well at Emerging Comms. And then in 2019, I made some massive hiring mistakes. And now that wouldn't happen, A, because we aren't allowed to, or I have put in a policy, you're not allowed to hire without 3 people sanctioning it. 2, you never hire somebody if your gut instinct says don't go ahead, even if everything on their CV and everything tells you that they're right. Something is not right. And it's always right. Your gut is always right. And so I made some huge hiring mistakes. Had I had the right management team in place, I don't think at the time that would have happened. I was so busy. And the thing is, I was busy and I was stressed and I was juggling. Whereas now I'm busy, but I'm not stressed. So that's partly because I meditate every day. and I practice yoga every day without fail, no exceptions. Christmas Day, doesn't matter, do it. So that's made a massive difference. You can think clearer, but really, if you make major senior hiring mistakes, it impacts on everything. And I started to see that our sales dropped off and just staff weren't as happy. And I realized, well, I'm actually not being a leader. I'm stuck in the middle, actually running the HR department. So I couldn't do anything else because that's a full-time job. I had a spate of bad luck. I had one member of staff who was off sick for a period. I broke her leg. I had 2 on mat leave who were senior. So we now have contingency plans and plans in place for people suddenly not being in the business. So everybody has a buddy system. Everybody has a number 2. If I don't have 6 people working for me who don't have a number 2, they go on holiday. Who ends up doing their work? Me. That will have an impact on the business. So I've structured the business around me being able to look above it and look down. And I'm not there yet at all. I'm still trying to sort out one more department, and I'm still trying to get my team to realize that they have complete autonomy to actually run with its decisions without me, that not every decision needs to go past my desk. That will take a bit of time, but we're getting there, definitely getting there. And if I was just 5 people, I wouldn't need that infrastructure, but I'm not. Yeah.
You know what, Domenica, it's the issue that I'm actually facing right as we speak, where we are making 3 new hires, maybe 4. And the biggest issue I realized now, has been I was meddling in things that I had no business in meddling, and I didn't let go quickly enough. So that meant I was always kind of babying the production team or the people who are experts in what they do, or they're training to be, and I realized, some things I just need to let go. I like to consider myself to be quite a humble person who kind of acknowledges mistakes and kind of learns from it. What was the turning point for you that made you want to kind of like seek help or seek a mentor or a coach to say, this is an area which is, was it because you were feeling too stressed, or could you tell us the journey that made you want to seek that kind of professional help or that extra outside person to come in and help?
Yeah, it's very simple. I've had 3 stomach ulcers, and when I got my 3rd, I thought, this is ridiculous. There has to be another way. Otherwise, what's the point? Plus, I did 28 business trips away from home in 2019, and I thought, I'm a parent. Wow. My daughter barely knows what I look like. And it was a stark realization that there had to be another way. Now, I'm not somebody, and it drives my husband demented, that reads books. I don't have time. I genuinely don't have time. I choose to do other things with my time, like meditate and do yoga, rather than read a book. But I've found coaching absolutely invaluable. And I listen to podcasts, you see, while I walk, as opposed to reading books, or I listen to audio books, because I find walking very cathartic. I find exercise very cathartic. So I just decided I needed to do something. And once there was this sudden realization that if I had the right people at the top, and I created, and this is what took the time, I created divisions where they had clear responsibilities for different things. So we have ops, HR, commercial, client services. We now have marketing, we have planning and strategy and consultancy, and they're all part of the same team. And now I'm doing sales and finance, of course, which I did very early on. So there's 2 things. One, you've got to hire people better than you. Now, this is not rocket science. And this is what most really good entrepreneurs, successful business people will say. Elon Musk, Richard Branson, they all agree you hire the best, and because you've got to trust them implicitly, and they're going to be better than you because you're going to be good at one thing. You're not going to be good at everything, and you need to recognize what that is. And then you put your staff first. So I've fired clients and regularly fire clients if they're bullies, if they make my staff upset. We have a rule as part of our culture that the staff come first, because if staff are happy, they produce amazing work. So that's also, the whole culture is around people and giving them the autonomy to get on with their jobs. I don't check in on them. I used to have weekly reports from my team, and now they go off in working groups, is probably a better way of putting it, to solve problems on particular problem projects or areas, and they'll just report back the stuff I need to know. And every week I do a speech, and I've done that for I'd say the last 18 months. Yeah.
There's so many things I want to go back to you on that one. I think the next question kind of relates to, this. You have, your surname is Lieto. I think you have an Italian kind of parentage, or maybe,
Yeah.
Could you tell us, I personally started my career within sales, so I have this kind of bias towards anything which is in front of the customer, and anything that kind of gets you that kind of thing where you get the revenue coming in and you worry about the production. I think as a 5-year down entrepreneur, I'm still learning, and I'm still making mistakes as I go along. I have that bias towards, okay, anything that will get us money, we need to kind of prioritize, and everything else, will kind of follow. You also had that kind of background where you started in selling, I think, publications, or was it display, and that was the first role. How did you get into sales, and what made you want to, because you went to uni and then I guess that was a graduate role, or maybe that was the first role that you came out of. What made you want to go, or what was the story behind it?
Oh my goodness me. So I ended up doing biochemistry, hated it. I actually didn't hate biochemistry, just hated university. Never imagined for a second I'd hate it, but I did. Also, various family reasons, a fairly not particularly nice divorce, parents, not me. I decided to leave university and go back and finish my degree later. Ended up taking a completely different path. So I remember talking to my tutor and saying, look, I'm going to take a year out and then I'll come back to finish this. And by accident design or whatever, so being completely honest, I've made a lot of mistakes. So I got into law school, so I thought, well, maybe I should just go and be a lawyer. I certainly would have made a good barrister. I love negotiating. But then they showed me the book list and I'm like, I've got to read all that stuff. Oh no, that's totally not me. Bearing in mind, I did chemistry. So I am totally a visual person, a visual learner. I thought that's not going to work. And then I thought, well, I'll be an accountant. I'm really good with numbers. I've always been really good with numbers. So I'll apply to PwC. And I applied to PwC and they said, you can do this, but you don't have the right personality for us.
Oh, wow.
To cut a long story short, I got a job for a local newspaper. And I thought, well, I've got 6 months more before I go back to university. And then I discovered two things very early on. A, I hate administration. B, I can sell. C, if you get promoted really, really quickly, then you can hire people to do the minutiae and you do the big stuff. I learned really early that A, I like studying a lot, but I don't like studying for the sake of studying. I like to study as part of a reason to learn something. Secondly, I learned I did not want to do the administrative side of sales, and I had to get promoted really quickly. 3, I had to sell something I believed in. So to cut a long story short, I ended up doing my marketing degree, my postgrad and everything while working. And then when I'd finished that, I started learning Chinese. So I've always had something where I'm having to study. And then once I get to a certain level of Chinese, I want to finish my MBA. So basically, I didn't go the normal route. And I was always going to be the kid that went to university, got a master's. That was always going to be my path. But actually, the chemistry side of it, interestingly, a lot of marketers are chemists because it's the same logical, sequential way that you solve a consultancy problem. And I didn't go down the normal route at all. And I would say that most of the problems that I see entrepreneurs hit in their 30s and 40s, whether that be divorce, dealing with bereavement, depression, not being able to cope with stress, I had in my teens and I had in my 20s. So when most people were out having fun, I had a lot of stuff I'm not going to go into, a lot of stuff to deal with, way too much for a team to deal with. So that has enabled me to have an amazing 40s and an even better 50s. So things that stress out my team when they're going through stuff I've been through before and I'm able to help them with. And things do not stress me out like they used to because I've been there, done that. And so that's nice, but not nice.
I guess in sales, you've got to have a thick skin to be a success. You've got to be able to face 9 rejections to get one successes, especially when you're starting off. And it's almost like perfect breeding grounds for, setting up your own business and, doing something entrepreneurial. How did you go from being in sales to thinking, you know what, I can do this for myself, or I want to set up my own company? What was that journey like?
Well, firstly, I would say I don't have a thick skin. And I've had to work really hard with a coach on that. I hate any kind of confrontation with friendships, with family, and with staff. It is my Achilles heel. Everybody has an Achilles heel, and you need to find out what yours is, and you need to deal with it, because everybody will have one. It's actually my ability to avoid conflict that has made me a good leader, because I'm always trying to find a solution to people being squabbling. And people will squabble, especially women, whether they are 12, whether they are 40, whether they are 80. They squabble a lot more. Men just beat themselves up and it's over with. And you watch that in the playground, it doesn't really change. So I think I would say that sales, I've never been a cold caller. I've never been a hunter. I've been a gatherer. I'm a relationship person.
Yeah. So
actually, the fact that I was good at sales is quite interesting. So got promoted quickly in sales because I was good at it, but I made sure that I was face to face. I started off in classified, hated it, didn't want to do phone sales. I made sure I got promoted quickly. I made sure I was face to face quickly, and then I made sure I had a team quickly so that I could do the stuff I wanted to do. And even negotiation, that you would say, well, Domenica's a good negotiator, so why? She must have a thick skin. No, I am very good at judging what the other person's pain is. I'm very good at judging what the other person will trade. That is not about having a thick skin. That's about emotional intelligence.
It's that kind of empathy that you have that means...
It is. Because I care, genuinely. I've never sold anything I don't believe in. I've never sold anything to anybody that I don't believe in. And I will leave and have left organisations, even down to my degree. I'm massively into veganism. And even though I'm not full-time vegan, and I'm into yoga, and a lot of the stuff I had to do at university was using lab rats, as you can imagine, and I did anatomy, which actually upset me less because somebody had given permission not to use their body. But there was just lots of things that didn't sit right with me. And you don't think about that when you're good at chemistry. You just go, well, I'll go into one particular discipline. But coming back to your question, how I ended up as an entrepreneur, I had different parentage, and that's not meant to be disrespectful at all. We're talking about the 1970s and 80s here, an Italian family. And also, I was a woman in a convent school, or a girl in a convent school. So very, very different to the way I'm treating my daughter and giving her the choices. There was no career guidance. Anybody who had looked at my personality would have seen straight away at the age of 13, she should be in business. So I used to have a lot of sideline businesses at boarding school.
Wow. What kind of things did you do when you were at boarding school?
I had a tuck shop. I ran parties, one of which I nearly got expelled for. I had good money. And I basically didn't realise it at the time. My dad's entrepreneurial and my uncle is, and a lot of my family are. I didn't realise it at the time, but the writing was on the wall. And that's the thing. If you put me into a really structured environment and say, dude, you must do this, and you can't work to your strengths. And it wasn't really a people-orientated degree either. When I think back, I think, oh my God, why didn't I go and do business? And why didn't I go and do marketing? And that's because I was at convent school. To be honest with you, to even go off and do a degree, most of the people in my class went off to get married because we like deportment, cooking, needlework, and this is only not that long ago. So, yeah, really interesting. And I'm now, I'll be honest, a complete staunch feminist. And I believe that women, men, any race, any colour, any age should be able to do whatever they want. And why did I end up setting up my own company? It was by complete accident. And I remember at the time I was working for a company where I was looking after Seattle, New York, and London. The company was everything I don't advocate in terms of culture. It was bullish, aggressive, and I have learned more about how to run a company from how not to do it.
The best managers teach you how not to do. The worst managers teach you.
Exactly. And one, I learned I never want to work with the US, and I never will. I find them a very difficult culture to work with. I'm sorry to say that, but I do. Two, more West Coast than East Coast. East Coast are very diligent. West Coast, they go surfing all day, and I could never, ever pin down my team. They were never at their desk. And then I learned the hard way about time differences, and I learned how to manage a multicultural company with time differences. But Every single company I've worked at has taught me something about either how to manage or not, or how to run and structure a business or not. Sales is interesting because if you look at sales as a transaction, you're not going to learn anything, but I never have. If you look at sales as a relationship that lasts a lifetime, then you're starting on the right track as to understand why a lot of CEOs and MDs are ex-salespeople. So most of the clients I've looked after in my lifetime are still in touch. They're friends. A lot of suppliers are friends. A lot of ex-staff are friends. And so I believe in relationships. And I treat certainly my staff that currently work with me now, they're like my family. I care about them as if they were my family. And they know that. And yeah, but thick skin, no, I wouldn't say I have a thick skin at all.
Interesting. I think a lot of what you've mentioned will obviously chime in with a lot of people listening and watching. There's so many threads I want to go back into. One thing that you mentioned earlier on was you said you're not a typical founder. What do you mean by that?
Most people I know that want to be entrepreneurs read a lot of books to find out how to be an entrepreneur. And then they spend months, years, days, weeks prevaricating about what their business should be. And then they join lots of groups to get advice from people. And they want to just say in brackets, I'm an entrepreneur. I actually don't want to be an entrepreneur. And I didn't set out to be a leader. I set out to fix problems. And I'm extremely efficient with my time. And so for me, it happened by accident. As I said, after I sold the first business and I'd worked for other startups as well, I was absolutely adamant I would never do it again. Very stressful. And at the time, it's the most expensive MBA I've ever done. Is running a business, which is why I might as well go and finish, because when I did my postgrad, moving that to an MBA wasn't particularly problematic, but I'd just been too busy. But it was an expensive learning curve because I'd never run a company before. So when I set up this company, the early days of putting in financial procedures and processes before I got an FD and finding the right accountant and having a proper procedure between sales, onboarding and ops and client services and having the right contracts in place, I'd done it all before. I knew what to do. And so that probably saved me a year and a lot of headache and a lot of stress. And then with this business being a lot bigger than my last business and a lot more complicated because of the China complexity element. So you've effectively got to run two strands of the business, those that deliver the work, which is all China-based, and those that support the work, which is all British-based, as well as a China ops element. That has had additional complexity. But what I've learnt in my previous roles and agencies has led me to be able to do it. But I never set out to be an entrepreneur. I never set out to be a leader, and I never set out to own my own businesses. It was not, I thought I was going to go to university, get a master's, leave university, and at that time it would have been something to do with chemistry, biochemistry, physiology or something like that. That was just what I was going to do. And in hindsight, I should have gone and done history or something, because even though I hate reading, I love history and I was very good at it. But when you don't have advice, and this is one thing I'd say to entrepreneurs out there who are in their 20s or in their teens, ideally, get advice really early on as to what your strengths are, because if you know what they are, you'll know what direction not to go into. So now that I've had personality profiling, it screams entrepreneur, but it was never something I set out to do.
Do you think the fact that you saw your father and uncle who were entrepreneurs or who had a business of their own kind of planted the seed for what you are doing now? Or
no,
not really?
Not really, because my dad was in catering. A lot of our family are in the travel and hospitality industry. He was in the world where there was no Zero and there was no CRMs and there was no technology and no web. I remember he helped me out in my first business with finance in the early days, and he was still doing it manually, which I found hilarious.
Old school.
And yeah, but I have learned a lot from him, and I have a great deal of respect for him, and he's been brilliant. I think what he taught me was a work ethic, and I certainly am probably way too hard with my daughter, because I just think that work ethic is everything. You do your best always. Doesn't matter if you're not top of the class in a particular subject, but you do your best. And I suppose I don't have much patience when people don't give me their best. I don't have that problem with my teams. They're amazing. But yeah, I don't know how I ended up here, really. I am not typical. A lot of entrepreneurs are setting out to be entrepreneurs. I never set out to be one. I thought my life was going to be very different. And when I think back, it's been a whirlwind. It's been busy. So trying to study while working full time in senior positions was very tough, but I did it. And now trying to find best part of 8 hours a week, which doesn't seem a lot to most people, to learn Chinese, it's difficult. And then work out every day and do all the other things I have to do to stay sane. But you set your mind on what's important and you do it. But yeah, my path was not a natural one. But I think what it's done is it's taught me empathy. I can see things from people's perspectives who are in very different situations because I've been there. Whereas, as I said, most people hit midlife crisis or problems in the 30s, 40s. I had those really, really early on in my life. As my life has gone on, it's got easier, a lot easier. Because I know that things will pass when they're not good. Or if you have a bad day, it's a bad day. It's not a bad week. It's not a bad year. It's a bad day. That takes experience.
Tomorrow's another day.
And tomorrow's another day. That's just a train. Just 1 second.
All right.
That's it after this.
So my next question is working out your strengths and weaknesses. Like, I think we as business people, business founders or entrepreneurs, kind of subconsciously, even if you're maybe well aware of it, what you're good at. Some people, maybe they don't realize what they're good at, or crucially, like you got to sometimes be very reflective and say, this is what I'm good at, but this is what I'm bad at. And sometimes it takes a strong person to realize, okay, I suck at numbers, or I'm horrible with looking at details. What advice would you give to someone to identify what their biggest weaknesses are?
Ooh, good point. Well, there are lots of free tools as a starting point. Do a Belbin, do a Myers-Briggs, and have a look and be honest to yourself and read it, because it is pretty accurate. Depending on which one you're doing, you'll be able to see really clearly if you're a process person or a people person. And I'm not saying process people aren't people, but it does tend to be one or the other. If I think it's the Belbin or the Myers-Briggs, I'm 100% all the 3 people ones, and I'm the worst completer finisher. So I know I have to have detail done by other people. And that's just one of many things I hate doing. I hate administration. I mean, to the point, I hate it. And I will prevaricate. And if you've ever read the book, Eat the Frog, basically, I always do the things I hate first thing in the morning at 8:30 in the morning, get them out of the way, get them off my desk. And then I leave the things I love doing, like consultancy, is like my reward for having done the bits I hate. I do a lot less admin these days, but I still have to do a certain amount. You can go and spend a lot of money and go and have personality profile testing. I did when I had no idea what to do with my life in my early 30s, and it was an absolute waste of money. It's very interesting because I did it with a friend, and she came out top scored in absolutely everything, has changed her career about 4 times over and is now a teacher and happy. But I didn't top score in anything apart from speed reading, which there you go, that says it all. Because I speed read, and I speed read because I want to get to the point of the story. So I even when I read a novel, I read the last chapter first. My husband's like, what is the point in that? And that's because I want to know what the book's telling me. I don't actually need to read the preamble. And I'm a bit like that in meetings. I have very short patience span. It's kind of like, please just cut to the chase, or give them the executive summary. I'm very good with executive summaries. I like people to give me the meeting notes with the executive summary, and that's kind of how I'm scaling this business. But it took me a while to realize that. But when I look back to my jobs, if I think back at reviews, it was always like, oh my God, you're the best salesperson we've got. But your administration, shocking.
You mentioned studying to learn, or studying to get something. What was one of the most insightful things that you've learned that actually really practically helped you?
Oh my goodness. I did all the Chartered Institute of Marketing exams all the way through from the beginning. And it was tough while working, but I learned an awful lot about management, data and finance. And I learned an awful lot about planning. So to date, I'd learned everything about delivering marketing, but very little about how to piece all the different strands of the organization together. So I now can think in the shoes of a CMO or an MD or an FD, because I understand what the different divisions do. That's been absolutely invaluable. And learning Chinese, and I'm very early stages, halfway through HSK, exams, has enabled me to better understand when my staff are trying to articulate something to me and it's not coming across. They've given me English that doesn't quite make sense because, of course, Chinese is written in a different order. That's been really invaluable. But every day I learn, and there aren't enough hours in the day for all the things I learn. And I'd love to be somebody that journaled everything, but I never do. And I'd love to be somebody who managed to get through, 3 books on Blinkist every morning, but I don't. So I tend to, again, if one of my staff reads an amazing book, then I will basically ask for an executive summary. I think the only one I've read recently that's very good, Spencer Gallagher, I'll send him a copy of this, but he wrote Agency Economics. That's a very good book.
Yeah,
he's great. So him and Peter wrote that, and I think there was a couple of chapters in there about metrics around staff billability that I've used. And The Art of War is a fantastic book for negotiation, and I've just gone back and read the summation of it that I wrote down years ago because I'm doing some negotiation training with my team, and it's really good for understanding tactics at war or in a situation where you're trying to trade. But generally, I read the news, only reputable sources, not newspapers. But generally, I have so much to do that I'd like to have more time to read. That's something that is in my plan for this year.
The other thing I want to ask you is going into a completely new country with all its own customs, ways of doing things, new language. When you say you're learning Chinese, do you also mean you're learning about the history of the people, how they behave in certain situations, and what the cultural norms are? Because when you mentioned you hadn't even gone into China when you had first started, like, that must have been a big culture shock for you. What was it like from their side? Because, there you are negotiating with someone who's a Chinese person. They don't know your style. How did you kind of adapt yourself and your style to what they were like?
This is a brilliant question. You asked me in the prep for this, you asked about a film that exemplifies, I suppose, the way that I behave. And even though this is a ridiculous film to use as an example and people will laugh, Legally Blonde, if you've ever seen it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now, the reason I chose that film is this: never judge a book by its cover. When I launched Emerging Communications, and the people know who they are because they'll watch this podcast, okay, I got told, you're white, you don't speak Chinese, you are going to fail within 3 months. And one of the things that we do well at Emerging Communications, and I'd say better than any other agency I know, and there's only one other agency that I really rate, Hot Pot are brilliant as well, we can understand the perspective of a European business, and we can understand the perspective of the Chinese, whether that be the supplier or molding of teams. And a big part of what I get involved in terms of consultancy is I mold teams. So I will bring together digital, marketing, international, Chinese sales departments, agents, whatever is the industry we're working in, whether it be universities or B2B or whatever. And understanding both sides is absolutely critical. So why I'm saying I'm learning the language, actually, with Chinese, it's actually spoken Chinese that's the hardest to come. So I can read quite a bit, and I can certainly do pinyin, but my God, my spoken language, because I'm not in the office anymore, or at the moment, it's much harder to come because of the structure of the sentence, which is very frustrating. But the cultural side I've been doing for years. I've been in this industry 9 years now, or 8 years. Basically, understanding how different sides behave is instrumental to our success, I would say, not just from the standpoint of getting the right partnerships with suppliers, but really so that you can make sure something is on brand and works globally, but yet is what we call localized to the Chinese customer segments. Localization is not enough. It's got to be on brand and localized, and that is a real skill. And I think the fact that Melody and I started the company, Melody came on really early, and then my management team is made up of half British and half Chinese staff, also works. But it is a constant work in progress, shall we say, to make sure that both sides understand each other. But we get the same with clients, and I'm forever helping clients who are trying to mold their teams to make sure they're on the same page. It's really important, but that's why I never get bored. It's fascinating. And the digital landscape changes every single day. The customers are changing and evolving every single day, which is why I love what I do. I just hate admin.
I mean,
If I never did it again, and I've always had a PA actually, and that's one thing I would say, get yourself, and certainly Spencer agrees with that. And it's only been in the last year, 18 months, I haven't had one. And that is because if you're not working in an office, by the time I've told somebody to help me with something, I could have done it. And also we're at the stage of the business now where if I'm not traveling once, twice a week, I don't need a PA to manage my travel. So, but I do miss having somebody tidy up my documents and things like that. Because
you give them a mess and you're like, clean this up.
So I don't have any help.
You mentioned treating your coworkers and your suppliers and people within your sphere as like family.
Yeah.
I too kind of adopt this, but you kind of get burnt sometimes. How do you deal with that? Do you kind of by default trust someone and then go on, or do you by default wait for someone to gain your trust and then they become part of that kind of inner circle in a way? And has treating someone been able to got you in trouble in terms of, because you don't have the objectivity, you let things slide just a bit more and then you're like, oh, I should have been a bit more tougher with them. How do you gauge? And some people respond to kind of very strict, and the carrot or the stick. How do you determine your style based? Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Firstly, you've got to have the right people. They've got to fit the culture. And that hire I mentioned a couple of years ago, my gut told me on her first day to just get rid, and I didn't. And that was the biggest mistake. That cost us dearly. Never doing that again. So right people, very clear structure, very clear KPIs, structure. This is your responsibility. This isn't your responsibility. And if it's a project, have a project owner that's drawing everything together, so that they know that's what's expected of them. If you're working in a small business like ours, you've got to have people that can roll up their sleeves, especially with COVID. We've had to furlough people in the retail and travel divisions, and we've had people step into other people's roles. So as long as there's regular reporting, we use project management software, we use time sheeting software so that we can see if people are at capacity and they've got too much on their plate. We can manage time and costs. But I would say the biggest difference that I've put into place in the last year or so is having an operations department, which kind of bridges between the delivery side of the business, which is all in Chinese, done by Chinese nationals, and the general management infrastructure, your HR, your financial, commercial, your legal. That's made a massive difference. It's almost like somebody else, another team, can pick up if something's gone wrong or about to go wrong. But you've got to trust people. You've got to be autonomous, and you've got to accept that mistakes will happen because of that, and then deal with it when it does. But the feeling it gives of empowerment to individuals is unsurpassed, to the point that we now have moved to a complete flexi culture, which a lot of my staff don't realise what that means yet. But that means there is no start at 9, finish at 5:30. There is, you have to be in the office twice a week for either your client teams or with your wider team, so that you're seen by your peers. And then once a month, we'll all meet up together to get the whole company in the UK, and the same in China. But apart from that, you can work wherever and however you want. So like a salesperson, for example, is going to be working flat tack on a pitch and then might take a few hours off the next day or whatever. I don't care. I just want people to work in a way that they're happy working. So I made a massive mistake at my previous agency. I had a tribunal situation with a member of staff who, because I had to make their division redundant because the world moved away from that particular service, that person at the time was a friend. So when I say that everybody's a family, they are. But there also has to be a line where it is business as well. So there is a fine balance between the two. I've thought long and hard about this, and I think it's very, very lonely being the leader without having a team that you can class as friends as well and meet outside of work. There has to be trust there. And there has to be transparency and openness. And as I mentioned the speech earlier on, I have a speech every week where, as much as possible, everything that happens in the business is covered off in one speech to the whole company at the same time. Hires, if we had to make anybody redundant, if we've won a new piece of business, anything that's legal, anything that's, as in going through procurement, anything operational. So every one of my divisional leaders will speak in the speech, and then I cover off anything that's at a corporate level. And that has made an immense difference in managing remote workers, because everybody hears about it at the same time. There's no cloak and dagger. There's no, she found out about that before I did, because everybody hears about it at the same time. So I think it's difficult. And in terms of motivating your staff, the carrot and stick thing, you've got to know the people that work for you, that actually report to you. You've got to know them really well. One of the things that I've implemented only in the last week, well, two things. And one was actually at the advice of my HR manager, Debbie. She said, once a week, you've got to just cancel all your meetings. So once a week, I'm not having any meetings to enable me to actually do my day job. And then I've started doing walking meetings, noise cancelling headphones. So basically, A, I'm not getting out enough. And B, if you're on the phone all the time with your team doing one-to-ones, which I hadn't been doing enough of because I was doing too many group meetings that I've now distanced myself from, you get distracted because emails or Teams messages are coming through.
Yeah.
When I do a one-to-one walking meeting, there's no distraction. There's the birds, there's trees, I'm getting exercise, fresh air, and I can listen. And I just listen, and there's no agenda, and it's kind of like, what should we talk about? And so that, I think, is going to be instrumental. But basically, you just need to change it up according to things changing in the environment every single day. We don't know how long we're going to be locked down for. And I think the world's changed forever. I think that flexible working is here to stay.
There's so many ideas. I really agree with you. There's so many threads that I've left untangled here that we need to have a part 2 of this. We should have a walking and talking recording.
I'd really like to do that, a clinic.
I think that would be a good one. And my last few questions, because we covered so many things from your early career to your working culture to your philosophy and ways of doing things. What's the future for yourself, and what's the evolution of your company, or the next thing that you'll go into? I know that you do work with other companies in terms of advising and being a consultant. What's next for Emerging Com?
Oh, that's an interesting one. And my commercial director asked me that yesterday. I want to extract myself from the day-to-day by letting my team get on with it. So I'm starting to, as I said, do more one-to-one meetings and have them run the weekly meetings and just report back to me. That will give me the one thing I don't have at the moment, which is time. I'll use that extra time to build out a corporate plan post-COVID for Emerging Comms, where we can't focus on travel and retail at the moment. We're very much focusing on core competencies and the strands of the business that are really busy. But in addition to that, there are other ways I want to diversify. I want to look at, do we diversify into other parts of Europe? I don't want to go to the US, as I mentioned. And do we diversify into other parts of Europe? Do we diversify in what we offer? We've already done that. New channels, new formats. We've now got a whole video production team that we didn't have before. So I need to have time to strategize. But I would love to be in the situation, both myself and Melody particularly, and some of my other directors. We want to be directing other businesses. So I can't see that I will be out of the Chinese business though, because that fascinates me. But I'd like to do other stuff. Like, for example, I'm working with a developer for WeChat mini programs. I want to be pushing that quite a lot. And yeah, there's a lot I want to do. There's a podcast series I want to start about health and stress management with a friend of mine who is a coach and spiritual healer in South Africa. That'll be quite interesting. So there's a lot I want to do. There's books I want to read. I want to pass my Chinese exams. And yeah, I just need to free myself up a bit.
Sounds like you get motivated by very, very big challenges because it keeps your mind fresh and keeps you kind of active as much as possible rather than taking it easy, which sometimes, we do all procrastinate. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I wouldn't say I procrastinate. I'd say I jump without a parachute. I think that's the problem. And thankfully, I've got people below me that stop me jumping without a parachute or tell me not to jump at all. Yeah, I don't think till the day I die, I'm ever going to be somebody who would say, oh, God, she's been lazy. Or I mean, holidays for me are hideous. And sitting on a beach is hideous. So I don't do that. I go on holiday, do sport.
You like to kind of push yourself.
Yeah, or ski. Or play tennis, but I cannot sit still. And in fact, the most I've sat still has been through COVID, because I've just sat there and done Chinese or other things. And I've watched pretty much the whole of Netflix, I think, like most people. But yeah, I'm a doer. But there are other things I want to do, but I'm very passionate about the Chinese industry. And so I can't see myself leaving that anytime soon.
To be honest with you, I've always in my professional career been in front of people. And when the first lockdown happened, I was at home and I was so frustrated because the one thing I really love doing, I wasn't able to do, which is being in front of people and talking to people and having drinks and going, negotiating things. So to be honest, I was stuck in a bit of a rut. And luckily I went on a break, didn't do anything with work. And that really kind of energized me, and it kind of made me kind of adapt to the new situations that we're going to be facing. I made sure that we have a small office that anyone from the team can go into if they want to change the scenery. I don't force them to do this just because, some people are a bit risk averse, that kind of thing. But for me, having that change of scenery and having that clear distinction between when I wake up and when I go to bed is really helpful. We've covered the future, and we've covered your hate of admin and getting these kind of things done. What are your biggest headaches at the moment? Apart from obviously COVID and admin.
I would like to invent a time machine.
Yeah.
I wish I didn't need 8 hours sleep, but I do. I wish I had known 52 years ago now, God, the power of meditation. Because if you can clear your mind, somebody like me whose mind works really quickly, you'll get more done, it'll make you more efficient. My biggest frustration is lack of time. There's so much I want to do with my life. The word bored, you want to annoy me, just use that word, because I can't imagine being bored. I don't have enough time to do everything I want to do. My frustration is that I get on the mat maybe half an hour a day. I'd like to be on the mat an hour a day. My frustration is I don't have enough time with our daughter, always do lunchtime with her, and when she's homeschooling, and then the evenings, but the days go so quickly. I'd like to spend more time with friends, more time with my team. It's a time thing. I'd like to have a time machine. And that's my biggest frustration, I would say. I tend not to be negative. I'm not a glass half empty person. So with COVID, I've seen the positives in that. We've overcome the obstacles, and it's difficult, but everybody's in a difficult position. So you're kind of all in it together. And my team have been incredible. But for me, my biggest frustration is I just wish I had more time. I'm always talking to people, love talking to people, but there's not enough hours in the day to do that. That's my biggest frustration, and I'm trying to sort it out, but there is still only so many hours in the day. You can't change that.
Two things. If someone wanted to discover more about meditation, what resources should they discover, or are there any things that you'd recommend them to check out if they wanted to find out?
Absolutely. I mean, I actually want to do a podcast on all of these techniques, but I would suggest, I've got a friend, Claire Crichton, who does some amazing meditations on Insight Timer. Invest in Insight Timer. Personally, I don't rate Headspace, but it's a personal thing for meditations. I also follow somebody, and I have an app called Boho Beautiful. She's also on YouTube. Her meditations are fabulous, very good, particularly for women, I would say. And they range from 5 minutes to 15, and they're amazing. I do those every day. Find your own meditative sport. So if you're a runner, run. If you like yoga, do yoga. If you want to play whatever it is, but do it. Move. If you do not move energy around your body, you just get stagnant, and it's very hard to think straight. The amount of people that I speak to, and most of my friends have very senior jobs, they're trying to juggle family. I don't think there's an exception to that. And trying to get them to understand the benefits of, even when I started meditation 18 months ago, I started with 2 minutes box breathing. 2 minutes a day. It nearly killed me. I've never sat still that long. And then I now do 15, 20, 25 minutes at the weekend, maybe an hour meditation. I've just built myself up from there. There are resources, but certainly Boho Beautiful, YouTube, they're free. She did a 14-day meditation course. It's brilliant. Insight Timer, YouTube. Wow. If you do a meditation within 30 seconds, it's driving you mad. It's not the right person for you because you feel really relaxed. I meditate after sport, because then I'm physically tired, I'm spent. I'm meditating without doing that. Impossible to sit still. And so if you're that sort of person, do sport first, is what I would say.
I will definitely check out the resource that you mentioned. Last thing for us, if someone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to get in touch with you, Ray?
Either via LinkedIn. There's only one Domenica Lieto on there that I know of. Or email me, domenica@emergingcomms.com. Or if you Google me, you'll find me. I'm, quite a few places on Google.
Infamous and illustrious Domenica Lieto.
No, I wouldn't say that at all. I'd just say I'm very human and very normal and very like everybody else.
Soon to be meditation coach.
I just think that what I've learned in the last 18 months about managing stress, I can't tell you that how it has affected and impacted on my life, and how if I don't, you talk about separation of home to work. I used to have to train, and I used to have that walk to the station, and now I don't. So I am not allowed downstairs from this home office until I've been on my mat. Wow. I have to separate my work and my home life. Otherwise, I just talk to my husband and daughter like I'm a CEO, and you can't do that. And so I basically have separation between the two. It's really important.
Yeah, I think that's one of the best things I've learned, because in the office I can spend like the whole day, 10, 20 hours in the office if I want to, but I found better quality over quantity. But it's not about me, it's about you.
No, no, no,
Thank
absolutely. I'm happy to do a clinic, and I'm happy to explore some of the kind of ways of managing stress. I wouldn't even say stress is the right word. I'd say ways of clearing your head. But I've had some amazing coaches, Fionn, who I'll send this to, Lizzie and Ashley, 3 coaches in the last 18 months, all of whom have helped me in different ways. And I would say coaching and mentoring is the best money you will ever spend. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for your time, Domenica. A lot of the themes that we discussed, we could have almost like a half an hour on each one. I'd definitely like to come back to you on a few things that we mentioned that we never actually explored it further. We hope to hear from you very soon, and all the best for the
Thank you
future.
very much. I've enjoyed it. It's been nice to actually look back at history, because I don't look back, I look forward. I'm actually learning to live in the moment a little bit more, but I don't tend to look back. And when I think back to my early career and the things I now know that I didn't know then, that has shaped who I am, I'd say. Yeah.
Thank you again for your time, Domenica, and we
Pleasure.
will see you soon.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.